Welcome to the Jaco Report. I'm Charles Jaco. Today, an interview with St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson. The city has seen 11 children murdered since mid-June. At the same time, it faces a crisis of confidence and a manpower shortage with its police department as the region continues to wrestle with the legacy of Ferguson 5 years later. The city continues to study whether to privatize Lambert Airport. A pair of billionaires have launched a private program to help the city tear down buildings on the neglected north side, and meanwhile, the city's population loss seems to be led by African Americans fleeing crime and collapsed neighborhoods, so that St. Louis is no longer a majority black city and soon probably won't even be a plurality black city. Those are some of the topics we're going to cover today in our conversation with Mayor Lyda Krewson. Madam Mayor, welcome back. Glad to see you again.
Very glad to see you and happy to be here.
Since the middle of June, 11 children have been murdered in the city of St. Louis. People are screaming their heads off about this. The tragedies shake everyone to their core. What are you and your law enforcement apparatus able to do about this?
One child murdered is one child too many. 11 young people have been killed in the region. It's not all in the city. That's a difference without a distinction, perhaps. There are any number of things that we are trying to do, which of course some of this is on the prevention side, which is going to take longer, and that has to do with summer jobs. It has to do with recreation centers. It has to do with intervention. Soon we are very likely to have a national prevention program in place, in addition to our partnership with Better Family Life. But on the enforcement side, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMS workers, they are also very traumatized, as are the people in neighborhoods and these families. It is a situation where a lot of this, we believe, is drug-related. A lot of it is retaliation. You may have heard one of the majors say on a station last night, there used to be a line. No one would shoot in the direction of a child. And my outrage is, who does this? Who shoots at or in the direction of a child? Clearly, in my view, somebody who doesn't have any respect for life and probably for their own life. The adults in these situations, or some of them are not adults, some of them are teens that are doing this shooting, are involved in behaviors which are very violent and very dangerous behaviors. So our law enforcement, our police department, every day is trying to intervene on these things, on these incidents.
Have any arrests been made in the killings of any of these children? I mean, I'm not aware of any. Have there been? I
am not aware of any arrests that have been made. We have a heck of a time getting folks to talk with us. We know that someone does know who is involved in these situations. They are not coming forward, perhaps for some good reason. They are scared. They are scared of the folks in their neighborhoods that are doing this shooting. They are scared that police won't arrest the folks fast. They are scared that they won't be held in jail, and they're scared that these folks will come right back to their neighborhood in a short while. These are legitimate concerns. However, the police department, circuit attorney's office, all of us work very hard to protect folks who do come forward, and you can be anonymous. Call Crime Stoppers.
You anticipated my next question, which is, I know there's a distinct lack of cooperation in a lot of communities. How much of that do you think is fear of retaliation from the psychos with guns? And how much of it do you think is ingrained mistrust of the police department, where they think, okay, you know, they'll take down the names, nothing will happen, you know, I don't trust these guys anyway, so why bother talking to them?
You know, I don't think it's possible to know what's the intent in folks' minds. I go to neighborhood meetings all over the city, and I know that good people in all neighborhoods respect their police department, want their police department to be there when they need them. So I think there is a fear of retaliation from shooters, from folks that are involved in the drug world or other illicit activities.
There's another side to that argument a lot of people have made, which is, yes, you have violent psychotics on the street who are heavily armed and apparently have no moral strictures about gunning down children. The other way to look at it is the job of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department to investigate these crimes and to try to prevent these crimes, and because there's been an upsurge in them, that your police department is essentially failing at its job.
Our police department, it is their job to investigate these crimes and to bring the folks who do them to justice. I would not use your word that they are failing. I think they are working very hard every single day to try to bring folks to justice and try to get some justice for the victims and the families in this matter. They do make arrests every day. We do take things to the circuit attorney's offices, and people are held in our jails. It is very difficult to get convictions when you don't have any witnesses that come forward or any folks who talk. We also, as you probably know, are short police officers. That's been talked about extensively. And so if we're actively recruiting for police officers, and if anyone is interested in that, we also have a cadet program, which helps young people 18 years old to become a cadet so that when they're 21, they can go into the police academy. So there are any number of things. We are also I am personally trying to lift the residency requirements for police officers in the city. Now, I think the city is a great place to live, and I don't think we have to force people to live in the city. I think many people want to live in our great neighborhoods, and that's borne out by when you look at the increase in young people, the population of young people in our city. It has gone up every year, every time it's been measured. So young people do want to live in our cities. We don't have to force people to live there. And when we're trying to recruit police officers, particularly police officers who may already be established in their community, and their kids are already in school, or they already go to the church down the street, they're not going to want to move into the city. So I'm personally trying to get the Board of Aldermen to put it on the ballot and get the residents, the voters of the city of St. Louis to vote for lifting the residency requirements for all police officers, but especially I think it will help in our recruiting.
And there's several items there I wanted to touch on about the police department. First, shortage of cops. I've heard the figure roughly 145 officers.
It varies day to day.
Somewhere like that. When we had Comptroller Darlene Green on this program, I asked her that very question. That there's a shortage of police officers and more money is needed. And she said in no uncertain terms, no, the money is not there. The money is not going to be spent for that. Said words to the effect of, the police are just going to have to patrol smarter because there's not one penny to hire extra police officers. How do you square that with the city's need for more cops?
I think that's not an accurate comment because we have these positions budgeted. They are in our budget today. And so we do have the budget to hire these additional police officers. Now, what's happening is we're running our police department on a lot of overtime, a whole lot of overtime. And that's a very expensive way to run a police department. So the money is there to hire these 130, 140 officers that we have been consistently short. We were that short the day I took office, and we've gone down to as much as 110, but as we graduate academy classes, we also have people who are retiring or leaving the police department. So the money is there to hire these police officers. We can do that without an increase in the budget by reducing the overtime.
But if the money is there, why aren't the officers being hired? Is it because
they're not applying?
People don't want to be St. Louis City police officers?
Across the country, and every major city is experiencing this, across the country, applications to be police officers is down. It is seriously down. And of course, police officers have been under a tremendous amount of criticism over the last 5-7 years. 10, 20 years ago, many people wanted to be police officers. There was a time, I was an alderman then, particularly after 9/11, when we had a waiting list for people to become police officers. Now, during the 2000s, 10, 12 years ago, there was a conscious decision made to shrink the size of the police department. I don't think that turned out to be a good decision. No malice there. just didn't turn out in time to be a good decision with the situations that we have now. So there was a time when we had a waiting list for people to become police officers.
Let's talk about the criticism that your police department and others have come under nationwide, but we'll focus on the city of St. Louis. A lot of people, especially in a lot of African American neighborhoods, just do not trust the police because they feel they're essentially racist. You had over 20 current cops who were caught making bigoted, racist, or violent posts on Facebook in that investigation with the Plainview Project out of Philadelphia. In that case, I have heard that maybe 4 to 5 officers have been placed on desk duty while the investigations are going on. And a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, in cities like Philadelphia and Phoenix, officers have been fired for this stuff already. What is taking so long to adjudicate whether or not these racist posts on Facebook make an officer unfit to patrol a city that is largely African American? What's the delay?
Well, I've actually read all those posts because, and you may have too, it's available online. And some are much worse than others. And so there are several officers. There's an internal affairs investigation going on right now. It is inappropriate and actually illegal for me to try to do anything to interfere with that. We are very close to wrapping up that investigation. Many of these posts, and I can't, I don't justify any of them, but many of these posts were made 10 years ago, 2007, 8, 9, in that time frame, all the way up through 13 and 14. That does not justify these posts. And they're made from African American officers, and they're made from women, and they're made from men. So, and they run the gamut of things from reposting something that someone else posted. A lot of them are that. Sharing, I guess, would be the right word. It's not appropriate ever. Last year, 2 years ago, we implemented a social media policy for all city employees, which had not been in effect before. Anyone who does that today clearly will be disciplined, all the way from re-instruction, reprimand, up to and including termination. Many of those officers also, I'm told, have been previously disciplined for those posts because some of them had already been brought to the attention of the police department.
Can you see any of
There's
these?
nothing good about it.
Can you see any of these people being fired, or is it just going to be?
Possibly, sure.
Possibly.
Yeah.
To broaden this out, though, if you've got a large segment, pardon me, of the community that takes a look at those posts, takes a look at the things that used to be posted on Cop Talk, the infamous message board from the St. Louis Police Officers Association, takes a look at a lot of the things that Jeff Ruerta, the business manager of the cop union, says, takes a look at a lot of things that the police officers involved in the Stockley verdict protests have been charged with. They put that all together in one big pot and say, wait a minute, this is essentially a largely racist police department, and I, as a African American living in the city, hypothetically, don't want anything to do with them because I don't trust them and I don't think they're on my side. What do you say to folks?
That's a hypothesis, but I don't think that's accurate. About 30% of our officers are African American. I don't have the exact number today. When you know police officers, when you personally know a number of police officers, you know that you can't generalize about any group of people, even including journalists, right? You cannot generalize about that. You have a few people that are making inappropriate posts, and whether it's on the old Cop Talk, and that's been gone for quite a while, but that doesn't generalize to all the police officers, most of whom, the vast majority of whom, are out there every day keeping us safe, trying to do a good job for us in our city,
so you don't
for
think
every one of us.
So you don't think this is a systemic problem? It's just, quote, a few bad apples?
I think it is definitely a few bad apples, but I think that most police officers are really good folks who are dealing with the most difficult problems of our society every single day. You know, every social failure in our country, whether it's mental health, which we don't have enough of, whether it is homelessness, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's trauma, every social failure that we have in our country ultimately ends up in a 911 call. And we ask our police officers to go deal with all of those things, when in fact, as a country, and this is not a city or a county or even a state issue, we really need to put more effort, more money into the prevention side of our crime issue so that we don't have so many crimes committed and so that we don't have the mass incarceration issues that we have. So it is a big issue from prevention to incarceration that police officers are interjected into because these social ills end in a 911 call. I'm not going to blame these police officers for all of this over here.
Let's talk about one of the side effects of this disorder in the street. If you take a look at the estimates on population in St. Louis, it seems clear that the majority of population loss now is coming from African Americans, specifically lower income African Americans. In most cases are fleeing what they see is total disorder in their neighborhoods and a collapsing infrastructure, and they're moving, mostly across the city limits into the county, but sometimes elsewhere. Because of that, you've got a rapidly changing demographic in the city, and you touched on it earlier. Most of these young professionals who are moving in are white. You've got
they're both.
You've got a shifting population balance where it seems, just based on the guesstimates now, that St. Louis is becoming less black, more white, is oddly becoming wealthier because a lot of the people moving in have higher incomes and are working maybe in the financial or tech sector, and that a seismic shift is underway, changing the demographics overall of the city of St. Louis. With those changing demographics, that is, higher incomes, some areas of the city being emptied out, how does that alter policy for someone like you?
Well, I think, first of all, we are dealing with neighborhoods, and you know we have a vacancy issue. You know we're taking down buildings. We're trying to shore up those neighborhoods mostly because it's better for the people in those neighborhoods. But those neighborhoods did not get that way 2 years ago or even 10 years ago. This is 40 years of decline, of disinvestment in these neighborhoods that we are now trying to pick up on and do something about. The shifting demographics is easy. You use the word seismic. I don't know if it's seismic. We'll know that after we get the next census. But we know that even in the last census, which was now about 9 years ago, the population that we lost in the city was primarily African American. That's not something that we want, but that is something that when there is a choice of neighborhoods. Now, in addition to African Americans moving out of St. Louis, which is a true statement, our city is much more integrated than it used to be. And so African Americans are also moving in a pretty large numbers to other city neighborhoods. And they're moving to other neighborhoods that provide, that are better for their families. Because we all want the same thing. We want a safe neighborhood for our families. We want our kids to be able to go out and play. We want decent schools. We want to go to the church down the street. We want to know our neighbors and, you know, barbecue with them. Everybody wants the same thing there. And so African Americans are moving around the city in addition to outside of the city.
But you don't see there necessarily being a change in policy or a change in direction because the average income, and I mean average income level, is going up. Gentrification, so-called, is taken over in a lot of neighborhoods. So it seems that the complexion, pun intended, of the city is changing. A
bit. Well, it remains to be seen how much, what those numbers actually are. Everything that we have now is anecdotal and some estimates, of course, which the government does. There are also a lot of people moving into some people moving into the city who are our age. People who didn't live here before, but perhaps whose kids are raised. Perhaps they've lived in the suburbs and now they want to be engaged in a really vibrant, active, walkable, fun neighborhood. So we also see that happening. So young people, of course, are choosing to live in the city. Older people are also choosing, once they maybe sell their house, to live in the city. We see this in many neighborhoods. Now, you use the word gentrification. There's a little bit of that in the city, but there is very little. Frankly, we have a lot of affordable housing in our city. Some of it is government subsidized affordable housing, of course. A lot of it is just affordable housing. Apartments, houses that are affordable to people of all income levels. And so that is also one of the great things about our city, is that yes, some higher income people are moving in, but there also is good housing in many neighborhoods. I was in a neighborhood last night, Gravois Park neighborhood. Lots of great housing there. Tower Grove South, Tower Grove East, I could continue to name them off, where there is a broad spectrum of housing available, from high-end housing to affordable housing and everything in between.
On this, pardon me, same topic, you talked about tearing down a lot of decrepit buildings. The Pulte Home Building Air and Jack Dorsey were in town announcing a program, tear down buildings, create lots in areas of the north side. A couple of, pardon me, questions about that. Number one, it strikes a lot of people as odd that while many of these buildings do need to be torn down, they're a danger to children, they're a danger to the neighborhoods. It strikes them as you get echoes of the old Team 4 plan from the 1970s, which a lot of African Americans looked at as a plan for ethnic cleansing, where the best use of land in these African American neighborhoods is just a vacant lot. You tear down the buildings, there's a lot there. I think a lot of people would have had a little better feeling about this when they're being torn down at the same time. All right, here's how we're going to invest to actually build something here, rather than create grass that's going to be mowed. Well,
but this is a step-by-step process. We are taking down some buildings. When the year before I took office, the city took down 28 buildings, 28. That was in 2016. In 2017, we took down 149. In 2018, we took down 358, and this year we think we're on track to take down about 700 buildings. That's a significant number of buildings. We have 7,000 vacant buildings in the city. So these numbers are improving, but we still have a big challenge. Now, one of the things that we're doing, we started this with Clean Sweep, which was the Regional Business Council and a number of construction companies. Started this 3 years ago. Fred Weber, McCarthy, Alberici, BSI, Keeley, lots of 12 companies taking down buildings in neighborhoods. We started that. We were able to attract some attention from Jack Dorsey and Bill Pulte, who took down 18 buildings. Their money, they paid to take down 18 buildings. And we're hopeful that there will be more of that. Those buildings, those lots that are next door to someone, new lot, next door to someone, that person can mow that lot and own it and get it. They can have it for free. They can buy it if they want to under a side lot program to take care of it. Those properties are being offered to folks in the neighborhood first. So if you live next door to one of those lots and you want a garden, or you want a place for the kids to play, or you know, whatever it is that you'd like to do with that lot, you can get that lot. Secondly, we are also trying to save as many of our historic buildings as possible. It's not just about taking down buildings. So through Prop NS, which is something voters voted on 2 years ago, we will be I call it really putting a roof, a little tuck pointing, a little gutters on a building to keep it from further deteriorating. We're launching that program. And then finally, you can't attract developers for infill housing, for new projects, if you can't show them some land. And so you have to start. Taking down buildings is only the first step of trying to revitalize neighborhoods. But in the meantime, I would invite you, Charles, to come out to a Clean Sweep or one of these days when we're taking down buildings, and be on the street when neighbors are coming out with their cup of coffee early on a Saturday morning and thanking you for taking down a building that next to them, where people go in and sleep, where people deal drugs, where a lot of bad activity goes on. Because these are good people who live in these neighborhoods, and they do not deserve to live next door to these buildings that some of them have had to live next door to for 10, 20, 30 years. It improves their quality of life, which is what this is really all about.
As long as we're talking about the north side and the kind of hellscape parts of it are because of decades of disinvestment, redlining, that sort of thing. The NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, that's flattened 97, 98 square blocks. Where does that stand, and are you worried that that could be stalled simply because it was on the list of possible projects that could have money removed for President Trump's wall?
But we got over that hurdle, and the contract has been issued to McCarthy Brothers to actually build it. It was 97 acres that we turned over to the federal government on December 13th of 2018. Design is underway for that project. And it's a very exciting project. It's a $1.7 billion construction project. A lot of that's also equipment, because as you can imagine...
When do you expect construction to actually physically begin?
We met with McCarthy last week, and they're thinking within a few months there'll be some dirt moved. Now, the design is not complete at this point in time. So before it's really coming up out of the ground, you're looking at another year or so. But big project.
Do you see developing around that? And the reason I ask is having some small familiarity with the NGA. I mean, this is an intelligence agency. You need a top secret clearance to get inside. It is going to be guarded by armed U.S. Air Force personnel because it is technically a U.S. Air Force military installation. That does not seem to be the kind of facility that is going to spread out, something that's super secure to the rest of the neighborhood. Given the nature of what this is, how is development going to latch onto this when it's not like a giant shopping mall or something where people come in and out? It's like you go here and no further because you can't get in.
Right. Well, NGA has taken a little different approach than they used to, which is that, of course, this will be a very secure facility, but there also is going to be a part of the facility where their vendors and their co-developers of apps and that sort of thing will also be working. But part of the project that was pitched to the NGA was the redevelopment of the roads, a new intersection at Highway 40 up Jefferson. We need to redevelop Cass, redeveloping the Pruitt-Igoe site, which is just to the south of it. It's also part of the Promise Zone, and Preservation Square, which is a housing project very close by, is also going to be rebuilt. That's about a $30 million. We have a $30 million, $29 million, I think it is, choice grant to rebuild that. So there's a lot of stimulus around, and there's actually a few houses going up right now. These are very early houses that are, I'll forget the word, but off the grid. They're so energy efficient and sustainable that they're mostly off the grid. So I do believe that there will be development happen around there. It's very important. We made that promise to NGA that the area around there will be redeveloped. And you'll also have 3,100 workers there every day, maybe more, but that's the commitment every day, who will, they'll go out to eat sometimes, they'll leave that campus as well. And so that's going to be a stimulus for businesses in that area.
Final question, we're almost out of time, and I hate to relegate this to the end, but the airport privatization, it's still being studied. A lot of critics are saying this is sort of a son of Better Together. This was a brainchild of Rex Singfield, and this is just another folly that is going to be studied and then fall flat on its face, and why even look at it, since no other airports in the United States except for San Juan, Puerto Rico are privatized. What's the point behind this? Because as my understanding is that the money up front that might be paid by whoever the airport might be leased to could be used for the city, but you've got $435 million in airport debt that, according to the FAA...
$600 million in airport debt, which would have to be paid off. So, that would have to be paid off.
And it doesn't seem like Lambert has enough traffic so that any lump sum payment up front would do anything except pay off the debt and leave the city with a zero-sum game. So why look at this?
If it's a zero-sum game, we definitely will not do it. The only reason that we would do it is if we're able to get a better airport. You know, our airport has hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. Our terminals are not going to last forever. If we want to be an airport of the future, we are going to have to find a way to make major, and I do mean major, improvements to our airport. Does that mean a new terminal? Maybe. Does it mean work on runways? For sure. And the FAA is funding less and less of this. It is their program to try to force communities and airports into public-private partnerships. You're seeing it happen all over the country. You're seeing it happen in LaGuardia. You're seeing it happen in Kansas City. Denver was going to do it, and yesterday they pulled the plug on something. But so everyone's struggling to try to figure out how to have a great airport, how to have good service for your businesses, because frankly, we want our airport to be an asset to our economic development efforts, because it's all about jobs. Jobs for the people who live here and jobs for the people who might move here. And having a good airport is essential to being able to have growth and expansion in your businesses. Now, if this is a zero-sum game, we're not in, for sure. We have learned a tremendous amount about our airport over this past year, and I get it, it's dragged on, but we have learned a tremendous amount about our airport by having these professionals study and provide us with information about, well, maybe you could do it like this, or perhaps you could do it like this. So there's already a gain to be made here. I don't know if we will use a private operator for our airport or not. That remains to be seen. But one of the things that I do know, in your question you said, well, if nobody else has done it, why would we think about it? If we just want everything to stay the same in St. Louis, well, let's just keep doing the same things over and over and over. We have to be willing to at least think about doing things in a different way in St. Louis if we want to have a vibrant, growing community. And when I say St. Louis, I mean the region. We want to have a vibrant, growing community to provide good jobs and opportunities for the people who live here and the people who we'd like to have live here. We're right in the center of the country. We're in a great location. We're on the Mississippi River. We have a real opportunity to have a very thriving economy here.
Mayor Lyda Krewson. Mayor, thank you very much for coming in. Pleasure as always. Our thanks to Mayor Lyda Krewson, and our thanks to you for joining us. We hope to see you right back here next week for another edition of the Jaco Report. See you then.